Good evening, great souls. Welcome. We will be starting shortly. Let's begin this evening with a prayer together. Please join me. Pray in your hearts or out loud. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great masters,
great masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yogananda Ji,
Paramhansa Yogananda Ji,
saints and sages of all religions,
saints and sages of all religions,
lovingly we bow at thy feet.
lovingly we bow at thy feet.
Sing through our voices
Sing through our voices
thy divine melody,
thy divine melody,
thy bliss.
thy bliss.
We are thy instruments.
We are thy instruments.
Play through us.
Play through us.
Spiritualize our bodies
Spiritualize our bodies.
and our consciousness.
And our consciousness.
Om. Peace. Amen. We'll chant together this evening and have a short meditation and little pauses in between the chants also. Just a moment to assimilate the energy of the chants and to feel more deeply the message, but not just the message meaning the words in the chant, but really the message of awakening, the message of the deepest vibration, because that's what the masters are trying to give us in these chants. And they do have the power to change our consciousness, our molecules, and the way that we perceive this world. If we were to perceive this world through the eyes of a master, we would see divine light everywhere. And so try to feel that kind of awakening coming through the chants and feel it percolating through your own consciousness on a deep level. It's very subtle. We'll also share some stories later on as well. And just dive into this. This is kind of like diving into a very refreshing river and feel not only this sort of splashing of the current, but also the force and the power of the current to carry us, in this case, carry us upward toward the divine. So we'll begin this evening. We'll chant Sri Ram Jai Ram. This is a chant to God, and feel the ancient but ever new power of this chant.
Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri 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 Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai 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 Jai Ram. 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 Shri Ram, Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram.
Sing Hey Bhagavan. Hey Bhagavan, 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 He Bhagavan, He Bhagavan, He Bhagavan, He Bhagavan, He Bhagavan. We'll have a short meditation after the next chant. And this is we'll sing I Awaken Thy Light. This is a chant of Swami Kriyananda's, and the words are, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light. And it also continues with, I awake in thy love, and I awake in thy joy. Sorry, I'm going to adjust the sound here a little. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I awake in thy love, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy love, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy joy, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy joy, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light, I am joyful, I am free. I awake in thy light. Let's meditate together for a few minutes. peace. Amen. So we'll share some stories now. And I think Nirmala will share hers first. And you'll have to turn that mic back on, I think.
I did.
Okay.
So, this is a story about healing the earth. There's been sort of a change of focus recently with all the protests and terrible strife in the world. But the coronavirus has not left us, and it is caused by an imbalance in nature. So, this is a story about restoring balance. It takes place in China. This story was told to me by Li Peng. So remember that name, Li Peng, who is now an old man with a thin gray beard, who sweeps the path to the Taoist temple outside the prosperous village of Feng Shui Li. The village was not always so prosperous. Indeed, it stood on barren land with only a few of the most rudimentary huts for the 3 or 4 families who eked out a living, grazing a few scrawny animals and planting seeds in the dry, bony soil with a prayer for their growth. And most often, their prayers were not answered. This desolation is not new to China. Oh, it is a sad story and an old one. You who have a chance to know what is befalling the last forests of our modern times should consider it well, for China was not always bereft of forests. Forests hold the soil, they hold the soul of the land, and the greenness of their trees breathes life back into the air that we breathe together. The fluttering of their leaves, like the white-barked Chinese aspen, has given rise to our greatest Chinese poetry. 1,000 years ago, Li Po walked through such magical forests and meditated there until his heart was clear and his thoughts flew away like clouds before the wind. Li Po wrote, "We sat together, the forest and I, merging into silence until only the forest remained." Those among us fortunate enough to have entered a great and beautiful forest even once in our life cannot forget such a memory. The spring in our feet, the vibrancy of our breath, and the joy of the cells in our body. But now the forests of China are dead. They have been dead for 500 years, or 1,000 years, or 2,000 years. There are so many of us. We have cut them down to build homes for cooking, for warmth, to clear the land for yet one more field. And our land has become barren. The soil has run into our rivers. The ancient and winding yellow river was not always so, but for centuries now it has flowed yellow like our tears, with soil eroding year after year from our barren lands. Even the young children know something is wrong. Never seeing a great forest or hearing the cries of birds in its treetops and stopping for the noises of unseen animals, these children know something is missing. They hear ancient stories of the wolves and the bear that lived in the forests, the stories of wild pig and Chinese mountain tiger. Their hearts, too, must long for a time when the forests were alive and when human life was more fully alive. But all is not lost. That village of Feng Shui Li sits at the foot of the Feng Shui Valley, which is again filled with the glades of bamboo and running streams. Beyond them, a whole range of low mountains and hills in the distance are covered with the sweet scent of Chinese forest. One day, my friend Li Peng sat down from his sweeping and told me remember Li Peng? It was from the beginning of the story. My friend Li Peng sat down from his sweeping of the temple and told me how this forest returned. At the end of the last century, there lived in this valley a man who the Taoists now revere as a dragon, which is to say, they meant that he means the spirit come alive on earth. Li Peng tells me his name was Tam Yang Bun. Tam Yang Bun. And he was born in a desolate village half a province from here near the Lo Chun riverbed. Now they say that as he grew up, he loved to visit the old Taoist temple along the dry riverbank. But he was a dutiful son, as we were taught to be in those days of the Confucian system that had lasted for more than 2,000 years. As a dutiful son, he worked the land for his parents, and being gifted with a mind of brightness, began to write poetry and read at a very young age. Sensing his potential, his parents hired a tutor to visit, as was the custom in those days, to prepare for the Confucian examinations. Taking the lowest level at age 12, he showed great promise, and the county itself supported his further studies. He passed successfully the medium and higher levels of examinations. Had he been born of a good family, he might even have gone to the capital to stand for the examinations known as the Emperor's Blessings. But he was not, and so he was prepared to work for the local magistrate. A marriage was arranged to a lovely young woman from several villages away. The pigs were offered, as is our local custom. An appropriate wedding ensued, and for 1 year they lived happily, soon graced with a young child. Then the sorrows came. First his child, called most precious gift, died of pneumonia, and his father, though not old, died in the influenza epidemic that same year. His wife, stricken with grief, became thin and pale, and she too died within a year. His old mother sought refuge in the small Taoist nunnery at the foot of the mountains, and he was left with his heart as desolate as the lands around him. He left the magistrate, taking a few clothes and several volumes of poetry, disappearing up into the mountains. Our friend Li Peng says that he first met Tam Young Bun when, as a young man, he went off walking and hunting in those desolate mountains beyond the Taoist temple that is now his home. He had walked far into the mountains after hearing at a farm of a strange Taoist priest who was seen occasionally living far beyond the settlement. As he walked far into the valley, he came upon an amazing sight. One whole part of the hillside was filled with young and beautifully growing Chinese shen trees, their delicate leaves fluttering in the breeze. He couldn't understand how this young and beautiful forest had begun so far up in the hills. He sat down with a certain joy among the saplings and saw a Chinese ground squirrel run behind the rocks nearby. For when the forest has begun to grow, the animals who came with it had begun to take shelter. In the distance, he heard a ching, ching, and then nothing, and then a ching, ching again, and then nothing. Rousing himself, he walked toward the sound, as that is when he met, for the first time, Tam Yang Bun. Though thin and simply clad, Tam Yang Bun gave off an air that was neither blank nor impoverished. There was a grace and economy in his movements, and a stillness about him that belied his strength. His skin was dark from the sun, and his eyes bright and steady. He could have been any age from 35 to 75, but this is often the case with those priests who have studied the immortal arts. He looked at Li Peng steadily and for a minute or two while he approached, and then he returned to his work. He was carrying a curved wooden staff, a Taoist divining rod with a long brass point at its lower end. He would walk several paces along the hillside and then ching, ching. The staff opened a hole in the earth at a small level spot or place where the earth seemed receptive. Into this he dropped one or two of the small shen tree pods, gently covering the hole with a sweep of his foot, moving several paces away to ching ching in another spot. It was steady, peaceful work, and you could see that he had already planted a series of long rows along this hillside. Li Peng sat and watched him for nearly an hour when finally he stopped and sat on a rock outcropping to rest. Li Peng brought his satchel of food to share, glutinous rice balls and vegetable paste, and offered them to Tam Yang Bun. They shared the lunch in peaceful silence. Finally, Li Peng asked if he might stay with Tam Yang Bun for the afternoon. Tam Yang Bun replied simply by handing him a sack of shen tree pods with a great smile. Li Peng asked several more questions and, as an answer each time, received more silence than words. When Li Peng asked if Tam Yang Bun had planted the entire young and beautiful forest in these hills and how long it had taken him, Tam Yang Bun finally laughed and said, "The earth replenished herself with the help of the Tao." This was to be the first of many encounters with Tam Yang Bun. But Li Peng did not know it at this time. He knew nothing of Tam Yang Bun's life, which would be revealed to him many years later. He only knew that he felt a peace and a steadiness in this man's presence, steady like warm sunlight and receptive like mountain stream water entering dry earth. He sensed there was some simple power working here through the shen pods and the land and the ching ching of the wood and the brass pole, and he knew it was part of the Tao that he had been seeking. Li Peng visited several times in the next few years. Once on a cold winter day, he came upon Tam Yang Bun standing like an enormous bird in the crane posture, wearing only a modest bathing cloth. In the cold air, his deep and directed breathing sent a pulsating cloud out in front of him. As Li Peng got closer, he could see the shining of Tam Yang Bun's eyes and a remarkable glow upon his skin. Tam Yang Bun taught him some of the secrets of caring for the forest. He showed him how to soak the shen tree pods in a stream for 2 days to soften them for planting and rapid growth. He created a small orchard and upland nursery for hundreds of new saplings. Always when Li Peng returned, the forest was growing and new hillsides were covered with saplings. The stream seemed fuller with moisture, and the young forest rustled with wildlife as if the animals had felt the hospitality return again to the land. Deer were sighted, and other animals from the high mountains began to return to the hills around the valley. Li Peng felt in this forest as if he were entering a graceful and ancient Chinese scroll, the watercolors of mountains and wilderness painted by the masters of old. Li Peng, still a young man, then moved to one of the 8 central provinces to continue his studies. Even as he studied, the last of the Confucian examinations were being held, and from a distance came the news of the Boxer Rebellion. There were rumors of gunboats and of wars over tea and opium as some great new forces swept over the land of China. Soon the new nation was in chaos. The armies of warlords were fighting from many sides and many factions. Revolution completed its process, and Sun Yat-sen was made president. It was during this time that Li Peng was to be married. He played a small role in the revolution and spent a short time in the revolutionary student movement, long enough to know that he did not have to follow the ways of his parents, nor take the bride assigned to him by traditional village custom. He recognized that what his parents wanted for him did not fit his true nature. With such upheaval in China, our friend Li Peng longed to return to his home. He did so and found his village much unchanged, but strangely more prosperous. The streams that had been small or non existent had more water coursing through them. There were new dikes, and water was led across newly planted fields, somehow more fertile than he remembered. The land was softer, more alive, less desolate. Up in the hills, Tam Yang Bun continued his work as if the Great Rebellion had not happened. He continued his planting of several large hillsides, of a whole mountainside, and then moving on to other land further back in the valley. He had now added Chinese alder, whose tender bark makes fine food for the increasing number of small deer and other animals in the forests. It was not many days before Li Peng climbed into those mountains to look for his friend. The shade was and moisture of the trees had somehow grown and brought with them their sisters, the clouds, and rivulets of water moved in the ground where the forest had matured, a moisture that brought the entire land alive again. As usual, Tam Young Bun said little to Li Peng, but shared most generously his balance and timeless spirit. The forest was growing by hundreds of acres in several directions, and on some days, Tam Young Bun took Li Peng on long walks to care for the areas of new growth. Descending to his village, Li Peng felt drawn to the Taoist temple. Leaving the world of examinations and revolutions behind, he formally entered the temple and commenced his study of the way. Over the first several years, the handful of monks there completed his training and began to demonstrate the unlearning which marks the art of the Tao. He heard the stories of the ancient ones and saw them brought alive by the monks in his Taoist kitchen and garden, in their mixing of herbs and in their economy of movement. He learned the Taoist postures and energy circulation meditation. Our friend Li Peng studied under the two eldest teachers of the temple and gradually made it his home. When Li Peng's parents died, he performed the ceremony to honor his ancestors and then committed his days to the Taoist order. For 21 years, Li Peng lived in that temple. He would occasionally walk up into the mountains and visit Tam Young Bun when he could find him. Some were now calling Tam Young Bun by a new name, Mountain Tao. Others called him a tree spirit. The forest continued to grow. When the next wave of the revolution swept China with the Japanese invasion, there came the destruction of the emperor himself. China was again in great disarray, and Li Peng stayed cloistered in the temple those years, wrapping himself in the practice of the Tao. When an interlude of peace descended on the land, Li Peng walked into the valley to look for Tam Yang Bun. He was amazed at how beautifully the forest had developed, how dense the trees had become, and how Chinese maple, red-crested woodpeckers, civet cats, and even tracks of wild boar could be seen among the trees. He was also astonished to see the beginnings of several new villages below the valley. The land was no longer desolate, and the streams flowed fresh and clear. Our friend Li Peng climbed into the mountains. He saw a poem written on a rock as he climbed, a favorite of the ancient master called Cold Mountain. The poem read, "When people see me, they say, 'He's a bit crazy. Not much to look at, dressed in rags and hides, seated among the clouds, wandering like the moon on water. All I can say to those I meet is, try and make it to Cold Mountain.'" Li Peng knew he was on the right track. Remarkably, Tam Yang Bun was planting the day he arrived. He could tell by the ching ching in the distance. When he encountered his old friend, they embraced, and Li Peng knew it was time to come and live with his master. He stayed with Tam Young Bun for 7 years and was taught to eat the herbs of the forest and the Taoist exercises of drawing the cream of heaven down through the limbs of the body. Every third moon, they performed a ceremony to make the oldest trees honorary monks of the Taoist temple. And in his years in the mountains, Li Peng learned the story of Tam Yang Bun's early sorrows and his mastery of the Tao. He learned from Tam Yang Bun's own teachers, the wind, the rocks, and the trees. He learned a harmony so deep it could not be called by any name. The two men lived together in the Tao, and ching ching became their music. They lived as Lao Tzu taught in these words: the spirit of the valley never dies. It is called the subtle and the profoundly receptive. To hold and fill to overflowing is not as good as to stop in time. The best of humans is like water. Water is good, it benefits all things and does not compete with them. The wise man places himself in the background and finds himself in the foreground. He lets go of the spirit, and the spirit moves through him. Then Li Peng fell ill and could not remain in the mountains. Even the Tao has its seasons and its difficulties. He returned to the monastery. Now over 10,000 acres had been reclaimed and planted. The new villages were prospering. Small dikes and paddies shone in the morning sun. Goats and pigs squealed under the houses, and there was laughter of children as new families thrived on this once desolated land. The village had built a fine new school, and the children were already accustomed to white rice from the paddy, forgetting the days when glutinous mountain rice was all that would grow. There was a singing like springtime from the mountains. I myself, who have been telling you this story, was born at the end of Mao's great triumph. It is a sad triumph for me because few are left of our 5 million monks of the Taoist and Buddhist way. But a few old men like Master Li Peng were allowed to remain in the temples, and somehow, as a young boy, I too was called there. My heart went to join him and learn the way of the Tao. So I have lived with him these last 8 years and heard the stories and practiced the 8 treasures. Several times I have climbed into the forest to look for Tam Yong Bun, but there has been no sign of him. I thought perhaps he had died, but then one day, in the far distance, I heard the sound, ching, ching, of the immortal mountain way. And now I have decided to go into the mountains. It is also my way. I write this story for you as I leave. Our friend Li Peng has taught me the secret of soaking shen tree pods and shown me the fire herbs that bring body warmth in winter. Sometimes I feel there is not much honor left of the Tao in our country, and I am called to these mountains, to the animals that roam there, to the sweetness of the forest valleys. I know there is desolation where you live also. I know that your forests have been lost and that many of your friends do not know who they are. But the earth will not always be desolate, and the Tao has its cycle of return. Perhaps one of you who hears this story will know the spirit of the immortals in your heart and will go off to the mountains to replant the forests of the earth.
Can you turn that thing around? So I'll share a little bit. And hearing this amazing story reminds me of a time when Swamiji was developing the Crystal Hermitage at Ananda Village. This was in the uh, mid 1980s, 1984 primarily, but really the process began in 1983 and it continued on into the late 80s and really on and on and on because the Crystal Hermitage has just continued to develop and develop. But when I say develop, I mean that it's become progressively more and more beautiful, more and more kind of organic and rich with life of all kinds. And Swamiji, in those early days, I remember um, him trying to work with what was there, which was just the hillside was just a big mess. It was a kind of a jungle of brush and it was kind of a fire waiting to happen. It was anyway, it was a Tomasic mess, and we had to kind of clear that hillside, which I remember got a few people sort of excited because they were concerned. Oh my God, you're clear cutting, essentially, is what it seemed like to them. What they didn't realize is that Swamiji had a vision for that, and he had a very heartfelt, organic sense for how to nurture life there. And so, in the same way as in the story that Nirmala just shared of the mountaineer Tem Young Boon, with the ching ching. Swami was not out there doing ching ching. That kind of was not his way. He had a different way, but it amounted to the same thing because he encouraged that, and he supported the introduction of literally dozens of species of trees and hundreds of trees and shrubs and bushes and flowers and um, just mostly for beauty. We could have had an orchard also, but he wanted to make a place that would show people that those hills could be beautiful. They could be beautiful in their way, and they could nurture life, and not just life of people kind of life, but birds and deer and small animals and just all, bees and just life in general and color, just rich, amazing color. And now when you go there, before this virus sort of turned our lives upside down, in every spring, literally thousands. This year would have been the biggest year yet. And there were 20,000 tulips planted or something. And we probably would have had 20,000 people to come and look at them across a span of 6 weeks or so when they come to bloom in March and April, particularly, and sometimes on into May. And in rare years, they would last all the way till Swami's birthday on the 19th of May. And he just had this way. And I remember him writing a song back in the 1980s called Channels. And the channels was a way of was sort of his way of encouraging the nature spirits, because as in the story that Nirmala was telling, when we don't nurture the earth, when we sort of lose touch with that element, then it's like the spirit moves away, and we have to draw that back, draw our awareness of it back, nurture it back into the earth. And so the channels are birds, trees, flowers, stars, rivers, mountains. and or mountains and rivers anyway. The order may be a little off, but it's pretty close. Anyway, and he wrote this song. It's the sweetest thing. Um, every part normally we when you write a song, when he wrote a song, when a song is written in four-part harmony, there's a melody, which is typically the soprano, and then there's an alto part and a tenor part and a bass part. And many of Swamiji's songs are that way. And there's a few where it's three parts or it's a duet or whatever. Channels is the only song that he wrote that has six melodies, not bass, tenor, alto, that sort of thing, but literally six melodies. And so what happens is one of them sings their melody and then sings a little refrain. And then the next one comes along and sings its melody. And then it adds its melody to the refrain of the first one. And then the third one comes, sings its melody by itself, then adds its melody to the first two. And so the song just keeps building with more and more and more harmonies. And by the end, the harmony line, the harmony refrain goes, Mother, we thank you. Your joy shines in everything. Open these channels that the world once more may sing. And that is the spirit of the story from China also, that we're trying to get the world, the earth to sing again, and our vibration to be in harmony with that vibration. And Swamiji was not a ching ching kind of guy. That just wasn't his nature. He wasn't the, he used to joke with us that he basically had a brown thumb, not a green thumb, because if he tried to grow something, it would die. He said, different times people would give him plants and inevitably he would forget to water them or whatever, whatever would happen and they would die. But what Swamiji could do is he could find the people who could nurture the plants and he could nurture the people who nurtured the plants. And so that's what he did. And it's just an amazing thing. And now when you go to Ananda Village, you see this amazing place. And 50 years have gone by, now 51 or 2. And you can make some changes in 50 years. And I'm not talking about paved roads. I mean, I'm talking about the nurturing of the land, the loving. It's really just the loving of the land. And it's just special and beautiful and unique. There's a very particular expression of that at the meditation retreat, which is actually open these days. It's open only by reservation, and people have to kind of go right to the cottage where they're going to take seclusion. But there's a garden there that's probably, I want to say, 5 acres or something, and it's nurtured and loved by, one divine devotee of Divine Mother, and probably others who volunteer and help. But it's just the most amazing thing. And that spirit of working in harmony with Divine Mother, bringing her love and her beauty. The Divine Mother is, Master, when he sang to her and of her, he often extolled the beauty of Divine Mother, from the stars gleaming like diamonds to the flowers and the beauties of nature here in this world. And Master himself appreciated the beautiful places, Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, Xochimilco in Mexico, other places too. He would explore. He went on a boat tour up to Alaska, and he loved the natural wild beauty of this country. And we, all of us, should just find the time, the energy to just appreciate and love the beauty of the world around us and try in our little ways to nurture that beauty. However that comes. I mean, for each one, it's going to be a little different. My family was passing uh, little text messages back and forth today, and we Nirmala harvested our first 2 zucchinis from this incredibly exuberant zucchini plant that just got launched just like I want to say like 2 weeks ago. I maybe it could be three, but I mean it was just this little tiny thing, and it's just went. Pow! It's just this enormous plant, and the first few zucchinis came off, and it was and they were like, I mean, they were going for the hills. I could practically hear these guys shouting, you just barely caught me in time. I mean, like I was gonna go. I was headed for it and headed for baseball bat land. And so I thought, all right, well, let me take a picture of these things and send them off because I mean, it's barely June and here we already have zucchini. And and then that started this whole flood of my mom's garden and other ones, and my one of my sisters chimed in and said, I'm stuck in the basement of a hospital, in the hospital cafeteria. I'm envious of you all. I'm jealous. And it was just sweet flowers, and different ones had flowers, and we all of us have a duty to bring beauty into this world. Now, that beauty can be of a human side, of kindness, of compassion. It can be a beauty of planting the hillsides and rejuvenating the land. However, that beauty comes, find that in yourself and share it with the world because the world urgently needs it. But more importantly, in a sense, is we urgently need to be the channels for it, which is why the song channels, because we sing that, we call on those channels. We are blessed by drawing them and uh, just re-energizing them in our lives and in the world. If we take from the world, then the world becomes dead and bare. And we live in an area of California that was populated by miners, by people who came for gold. And there's nothing particularly wrong with looking for gold, but if it's just all about taking and searching for those kind of riches without the corresponding gift to the world, gift to the nature, then it's like the spirit runs away. So all of us need to sort of replant how in whatever way we can, and it can be replanting the human spirit. It doesn't have to just be planting trees or bushes, but just to give that nurturing energy back to the world. It's very, very much, very urgently needed. So we'll chant and just have time for another few, but we'll sing how about Pole Star? And maybe I'll pick up the guitar and give this back to you.
This is one of Yogananda's chants.
I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy.
I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life.
Though my sea is dark and my stars are bright, though my sea is dark and my stars are bright, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. 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 I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. I have made thee, O star of my life. Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Let's close now by sending out into the world the blessings of peace, of harmony, of divine love and blessing. Let's feel that vibration of Om as we chant, going out to fill the whole world, healing, loving, supporting, and uplifting the consciousness of all people, all creatures, every atom of creation. Let's rub our hands together, drawing energy and then channeling that energy out in the vibration of Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. God bless you.
God bless you all.
Let us all live in harmony and joy.